Thanks, Melissa.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to our third session of the Winter Conference. I'm going to hand this over to Melissa for all of her expertise, and thanks for sharing.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm happy to be with all of you today. It's a little bit odd to not see you, but I am grateful for the opportunity to talk with you. So I'm going to be speaking for the next few minutes about how we talk with our kids about anxiety, which feels like a very broad topic and one that seems to be even more relevant today in the midst of pandemic, world events, all of the things kind of happening in our world and in our lives. So just a very brief little bit about me. I worked for about 20 years in the school system, in early childhood, elementary, and middle school as a school social worker. So I just want to say thank you for all of the work that you do to support our students. You do tremendous jobs. So just a few very quick statistics, which I think kind of obviously kind of highlight the need for this kind of conversation and discussion today. Anxiety disorders continue to be the most common diagnosis. And, I found this statistic according to the CDC in August of 2020, just that highlighted the obvious increase in anxiety and depression over the past year. So, the prevalence of anxiety increased threefold compared to 2019. The prevalence of depressive disorder was approximately 4 times what was reported in 2019. So, statistics do a good job of letting us know kind of where we're at and where our kids are and what their struggles are. So I like this quote or this understanding of anxiety from Dr. David Barlow, a psychologist, that anxiety is an overrepresentation of the problem and an underestimation of our resources to deal with it. So we know that anxiety catastrophizes and makes most challenges feel bigger, and the bigger and more overwhelmed we feel, the less capable and competent we feel in terms of managing that. So that is the crux of why we are wanting to look at what are some tools to help understand and manage worry. And then how can we use resources and supporting materials to practice and reinforce those concepts? So I was able to attend a conference and a training by Lynn Lyons, who's a licensed clinical social worker on the East Coast. And she wrote a book called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents, along with Reed Wilson, who's also a psychologist. And I really found the training and the book to be really instrumental in the clinical work that I now do with my clients. I work with primarily children and adolescents and young adults, as well as their families. And I think, like you, I'm always looking for really concrete strategies and tools to be able to use with our young people to support their experiences, and also to support families in understanding how best to respond to their children. So with that being said, one of the biggest things that Lynn Lyons and Reed Wilson highlight in their book, as well as in their trainings, is this concept of content versus process. And maybe some of you are familiar with Lynn Lyons' work, but I found this to be a really powerful shift in mindset for me. And so she talks about how the content of anxiety is the why, and the process is the how. So many of our interventions at times get really bogged down by the content. So When we stay in the content of the worry, we do everything possible to kind of scramble to try to avoid the worry, right? And to not trigger it. So we think about like, what can we do about this particular worry? How do we respond or get rid of it, right? Versus the process, which is, how does worry work? How does worry show up? How does it operate? And how are we going to respond when it does? So getting out of the content, which Lynn Lyons describes as doing the disorder, which I thought was such an interesting way to view it. So when we're focused solely on like trying to eliminate or eradicate the worry, we're really doing the anxiety, right? Versus the process of how do we manage and respond to worry when it shows up, because it's going to. So what are these 7 tools? So the 7 tools that we're going to talk about over the next several minutes are: 1, expect to worry. 2, talk to your worry. 3, be unsure and uncomfortable on purpose. 4, breathe. 5, know what you want. 6, bridge back to successes. And 7, take action on your plan. So let's delve deeper into each of these steps. First one, expect to worry. So we are going to operate from that understanding that we're going to expect worry to show up. So this involves helping kids understand how worry works. We want them to recognize that anxiety is normal, it's healthy, it's to be expected, right? And our job as counselors, as therapists, is to offer them reassurance that we are going to work together with them on developing the skills in order to reduce the impact of the anxiety. So we're not eradicating worry, we're not eliminating anxiety. We're working with our students, our kids, our adolescents on developing the skills and the tools that they need that reduce the impact that anxiety has on them. So these are some of the ways that I start to introduce to kids, how do we think about worry? So I talk with the kids about their brains, and I often show them, whether it's through the visual that I have here on the screen of a brain where the amygdala is, or we use the hand model of the brain, right? That Dan Siegel does such a fabulous job with, and we highlight where in their hand model of the brain is the amygdala. We talk about the fact that the amygdala is your brain's alarm system, which is great. It lets us know when there's danger, right? When we need to be afraid. It's our fear center, so to speak. And it's natural and protective, right? Like our own fierce warrior, which is why I put the book, Hey Warrior, up there. The challenge with our amygdala is that it's not always an accurate reporter, right? So it can't always tell the difference between real and perceived danger. So I talk with kids about the smoke alarm or a smoke detector, right? That a smoke alarm can't tell the difference between smoke from a fire and smoke from burnt toast in the toaster. And more often than not, kids laugh and they have a story to share about how this one time mom was cooking or dad was doing something and there was smoke in the kitchen, there was no fire, but the smoke alarm went off, right? So talking with kids about how that's how our amygdala and our worry can work is it's a good, normal, healthy response, but it's not always accurate, okay? The book, Hey Warrior, that I have the image of on your screen, that little warrior character is the amygdala. And so this book is by Karen Young, and she's a psychologist out of Australia. And I have found it to be one of the best strategies books that explains anxiety to kids. And not even just kids, but I've used it with my teens and with my young adults, because not only does it talk about the role of the amygdala, but it also talks about what happens inside the body. And so it helps to explain the physical symptoms that can happen inside the body. It talks about, the heart beating faster to get the fuel where it's needed in the body. It talks about the digestive system shutting down because all of the energy is focused on the extremities if you need to fight or flee. So it really does a concrete job, I think, in words and terms that make sense to kids. So that's a huge tool and a resource. And I actually, there's a plush stuffed animal that you can purchase too. So I have this little guy in my office as well. The second tool is to talk to your worry. So we know that when we can talk with our kids about naming their worry, it helps to externalize it. So instead of feeling like I am my worry, which can happen, being able to name it, oftentimes draw it, helps kids have some distance from it to be able to talk to their worry when it shows up. And we also can then start to have conversations with our worry. We can recognize its patterns, its predictability, to be able to say things like, "You're so boring, Howard. You always tell me the same things," right? Or, "I'm tired of you showing up at bedtime," right? And so we can talk with our kids, our students, about how they can have conversations with their worries. So here are some resources as well. So the book Worry Says What is a great source as well, oftentimes for young children. The main character, the little girl here, she realizes that worry doesn't make her feel better. And so she decides at a certain point that she's fed up and she is done letting worry be the boss. And so she figures out how to talk back to worry when worry shows up during math class, telling her that she's not a good math student, when she's out at recess and doesn't have anybody to play with. And so as she learns to ignore and talk back to worry, worry starts to shrink. And there's it visually shows that in the story. And kids recognize that as you're reading the book. The other book I have highlighted here is from Go Zen. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Go Zen kind of website resources, but they do a lot of work on also helping kids understand how worry works and being able to talk back to worry. This is, I think, in many ways a great like middle school-ish book because there's a lot, it's almost like a graphic novel. And so I will oftentimes make like copies of the pages to be able to use with my clients. There are activities. It talks about different strategies and different responses that you can develop to talk to your worry. I included a couple drawings of some of my clients who have drawn their worries. So this yellow one is from an elementary student that I'm working with who has a bathroom worry. And the worry shows up and tells her that she's going to have an accident at school. And so some of the messages that she's developed to be able to talk back to her bathroom worry are, I hate you. You're not the boss of my body. You're not helping and I'm going to ignore you. So I love this step and this tool because oftentimes kids start to step into their own power and take their power back. And I allow them to use words like hate or shut up, right? And I think that that really feels empowering to them. And it feels a little naughty because sometimes they're using words that parents are like, oh, don't say that. We don't say shut up. We don't say stupid or hate, right? And so it allows them to kind of really regain some power. This other drawing is from actually a middle school student that I was working with who named his worry Howard. So in this, on the left side of the image, Howard's big, he is small, and with his therapy, we incorporated cognitive behavioral therapy, talking therapy, along with medication. And so he said, when we did the before and after, it was like before his anxiety pill and understanding how anxiety works, and then after. And the after images highlight the shift in size, right? So my client was really able to shrink his worry and shrink Howard. And my client felt more emboldened as he did that. All right, this is a big one. So be unsure and uncomfortable on purpose. So this is a little bit, I kind of think about this one as almost like an exposure approach, like we would use for individuals with OCD. But in the book and in her training, Lynn talks about how anxiety demands two things: certainty and comfort. And so anxiety likes to show up when things feel uncomfortable and uncertain, right? And so in order to move through those unsure and uncomfortable moments, we need to be able to practice getting to the other side. And so this one, I think, in many ways is the nuts and bolts of our work with individuals with anxiety. So worry says stop, avoid, right? And I think the natural tendency, not just for the individual with anxiety, but even for the family system, oftentimes is, okay, well, we're going to avoid walking on the same side of the street as dogs because her fear of dogs is so strong, right? Or we're going to avoid going to school because it causes her social anxiety to go up, right? So our commitment, our responsibility is partnering with our kids to be able to support them in experiencing the discomfort and knowing that they can ride it out in order to land on the other side of the wave. I talk about anxiety coming and going like waves. So, some of the messages that, I encourage kids to try as we're focusing on this, this tool is, can you say, like, I'm willing to not know how things are going to turn out, or I'm willing to feel uncomfortable because I want to be able to sleep at my friend Jenny's house. So practicing that discomfort. So it really involves kind of leaning in order to learn a new way to manage it. So again, Anxiety is about avoidance. So, how do we step into those experiences, right? How do we lean in versus pull back and step out? So, we want to acknowledge with our kids that worry really needs to show up in order to learn a new way to manage it. And so, just grab the book here. This book, The Owl Who is Afraid of the Dark, is a great resource that I use with both elementary and middle school kids. I actually even had a high school student borrow it. She saw it on my table and she's like, "What is that about?" And when I was telling her, she said, "Oh, can I borrow it?" So it's a short little chapter book, but it is about Plop the Owl, who learns to lean into his worry because here he's an owl and owls are nocturnal and he's afraid of the dark, right? And he realizes that when he does eventually fly outside of the nest and encounters other people who appreciate the dark, it helps him view dark differently. So some of the chapters in here are: dark is exciting, dark is kind, dark is fun. I think that's the one that highlights fireworks happen in the dark. Dark is necessary. Dark is fascinating, dark is wonderful, dark is beautiful. And so each chapter focuses on a time that Plop learns to leave the tree at the encouragement of mom and dad and discover something new that he was not aware of before when it comes to the dark. All right, the next one is breathe. Such a simple one, and yet I feel like at times challenging, right? And so we know that anxiety impacts our ability to take long, deep breaths. In moments of stress, panic, and anxiety, our breath becomes really shallow. And so I talk with kids about that and being able to recognize when their breath starts to occur very quickly. And then we talk through some different strategies and things that we can do to manage our breathing. And so I have a few of those highlighted. I'm just going to show a few of those to you. So the first one is the breathe like a bear. I really like this one because I think, you know, sometimes when we talk about breathing techniques for our kids, it's for whatever reason, I feel like it can be challenging, or if we talk about mindfulness exercises. So this is fun. It has cute little animal images. And it's 30 mindful moments for kids to feel, excuse me, calm, focused, anytime, anywhere. And it breaks it down into different breathing strategies for different reasons. So there are breathing strategies for calm, for focus, to imagine, make some energy, and to relax. So I thought that we would just look at one of the relax ones. So even within each of those different breathing categories. So here it is for relax, and it lists 6 different breathing strategies to be able to utilize. And so we're going to look at the kitty cat stretch together. So the kitty cat stretch says to sit up tall and clasp your fingers together. Stretch your arms straight out in front of you and turn your hands so your palms are pressing away from your body. Take a big breath in, let the air out, and round your back like a kitty cat stretching. Pull your belly in and press your hands as far away from you as you can. Take another big breath in and let the air out and round your back like a kitty cat stretching. Let your hands go and give your arms a little shake. So they're very simple, and yet, like I said, I feel like kids like the idea of the animal and just the simplicity, I think, of the breathing exercise. Alpha Breaths is another book that I use. So it's Alpha Breaths, the ABCs of Mindful Breathing, written by Christopher Willard and Daniel, I don't know how to pronounce his name. But I know that Christopher Willard has done some PESI trainings on mindfulness for kids. So I was happy to see this book when it came out. So it goes through the alphabet. And it gives some very simple, even simpler than Breathe Like a Bear strategies. So alligator breath, open your arms wide like an alligator, jaws on the in-breath, snap them shut on the out-breath. E for elevator breath. As you breathe in, imagine your breath going all the way up to the top floor of your belly. As you breathe out, imagine it going all the way down to the bottom. You can even count floors as you breathe. So like I said, just some very concrete, simple, relatable strategies that kids can use. So probably geared more toward elementary, but certainly I think even older kids can practice utilizing some of the alpha breath strategies. So I also highlighted some other strategies on this page. 5-finger breathing. That's one that I talk with kids about being able to do quietly sitting at their desk. Nobody needs to know that as they're experiencing an anxious moment, they're practicing their breathing by tracing up their finger as they breathe in, exhaling as they go down, inhaling as they go up. So they can hold their hand right in their lap. Nobody needs to know. 4-7-8 breathing is probably a little bit more challenging for little people just to hold their breath for 7. So it's breathing in for 4, holding for a count of 7, breathing out for 8. I talk with kids about what really matters with the 4-7-8 breathing, and the reason why the 4-7-8 breathing is there is we want our exhale to be twice as long as our inhale, and for there to be a momentary pause between the two. The extended exhale sends a signal to our brain that reminds our brain that we are safe and that we can relax. And so I have that conversation with kids about why the 4-7-8 breathing is a good strategy and a good tool. Breathing mantras, I feel, are good for people of all ages. So being able to come up with like a breathing phrase as we're breathing in, we might say, breathing in, I calm my mind. Breathing out, I settle into my body. I feel like my high schooler, college students, they're ones that really like developing some type of phrase or mantra that they can say as they are practicing those deep breaths in and out. 5 senses grounding technique. That's another one that can be done quietly. Nobody needs to know. And I think that is reconnecting our body and our mind to the present moment. So it's a really good strategy to use when a student is in a panic moment, right? Or feeling really disconnected from their breathing and from their body. So re-engaging with the present moment in a way that shifts our focus from what's happening internally and the sensations that we're feeling to be able to name things that we can see, name things that we can hear, name things that we can touch, that we can smell, and that we can taste. And then the Hoberman sphere, I have one, but it's not right here for me to grab. But I use that actually as a visual tool to show kids. So it starts out small and then it expands. And so I use the Hoberman sphere with breathing to sometimes practice that 4-7-8 breathing so that kids have that tangible visual toy or tool to kind of coach them and guide them through and to notice what that looks like. Okay. All right. The next step number 5. So, know what you want. This is really a helpful strategy for all kids. I think that in some ways, older kids can really latch on to this, and it's shifting away from the anxiety what ifs to landing in what is. So it's moving away from some of those automatic negative thoughts or thinking traps and shifting into more of the logic, facts, goal-oriented thinking. So this is one where I oftentimes will write these 2 phrases on an index card for students or for kids and teens. And so, writing, I want blank, so I'm willing to blank. Okay. And so this is where you can decide on or pick 1 or 2 goals that the child has. And oftentimes they're able to identify what they want to be able to do. So, I have one client who she really wanted to be able to have a sleepover at her friend's house. And her worry, who she called Safekeeper, would show up and prevent her from being able to spend the night. And so we really focused on what she wants, which was, I want to be able to sleep at my friend Jenny's house. So I'm willing to feel uncomfortable and maybe stay awake the whole night if that's what it takes in order to be able to reach my goal, right? So I find that being able to write it on a blank index card, being able to post it somewhere, being able to even write it out and put it either on the bathroom mirror as a reminder or setting it at the desk. It's just a nice strategy and also a concrete tool to remind, what am I working towards, right? When anxiety shows up, when my worry shows up, what do I want? And what am I willing to do? And it kind of leads back to, that being unsure and uncomfortable on purpose, right? The other strategy that I use with this step in knowing what you want is I will ask kids to find someone, usually a grown-up or an adult, who they know is really good at something. And I have them ask that person questions, almost like a little interview. So it could be like, hey, I know you're really good at this. how did you get there? What steps did you take in order to become really good at that? So this is where we're inviting the child to do some research, to kind of do an experiment, ask somebody, right? Because oftentimes people don't arrive somewhere without putting in effort and work. And so it helps to kind of reinforce this concept of I want, so I'm willing to. Okay, bridge back to successes. This is a fun one because as we're building these opportunities and as we're supporting our kids in being able to step into that discomfort and that uncertainty, what we're building is a bank of experiences that allows them to go back to remember, hey, remember that time when I showed up for that job fair and I was super nervous and I only went to one table because I could barely get my words out, but I did it and I dropped off my resume and I left. I did that. I survived, right? So we are creating, as we're supporting and encouraging our kids to move through these moments of discomfort, to know that they can, we're creating these reminder bridges and we're building their confidence in being able to recognize, yes, I was uncomfortable. No, I didn't do it perfectly, right? Yes, my worry showed up and told me, don't do it. Don't do it. Your voice is going to shake. You're going to be uncomfortable. I did it anyway, right? So instead of allowing that avoidance to come in so that our kids aren't stretching their confidence muscle and recognizing that they can do things that are uncomfortable, we're really creating these bridges of success that we can loop back to. So some of the ways that, I talk with kids about this is, what can you do now that you weren't able to do a few years ago, right? And so it may be, I'm now able to present in front of class, even though I get really sweaty and my voice shakes and like my stomach is in knots right before I have to get up in front of my class, right? And asking them, can you remember something that was really difficult or that you worried about when you first tried it, but now it seems simple, or now it doesn't seem as bad or as scary, right? And kids can often loop back and recall. And if they can't, oftentimes I've been working with them long enough that I can draw from my bank of knowledge to say, hey, I remember a time when you were really scared to sleep in your own bed. And now look at you. Now you're able to do that, right? Another way is to be able to have them make a list of accomplishments that they're really proud of. And so that may be hard. They may only have one or two, or they might not have any initially. So we're working on adding to that list. So we know that worry has amnesia. Worry forgets success, right? And so our job is to support our students and our kids in being able to have these bridges, to be able to have these reminders, to say, oh, yeah, actually, like, yes, I know that anxiety has amnesia and forgets all the steps that you've taken, but I haven't forgotten, because here's this bank that we can pull from. All right. Take action on your plan. Step number 7. So all of these tools, all of these steps are leading to this, which is, okay, how do we take all these pieces and put them together? And so the image that I often show kids is one of a ladder. And we talk about laddering, taking one rung or one step at a time, right? And being able to say, depending on the situation or the worry or the goal, like, what is your goal, right? And that goes back to know what you want, right? And what are the steps that you can take in order to get there? We know that sometimes anxiety, worry shows up in a leapfrogging way, right? And causes us to think or feel like we have to go from A to Z in like this one full swoop, right? And so having the image of a ladder, like, we can't get from rung one all the way to the top rung just in one step. It involves small, purposeful next right steps, right? So using the image of a ladder and then being able to write it out for a student, right? What's the first step? If your goal is to be able to, join friends at recess, what can we do first, right? Maybe there's a nonverbal cue that you give somebody, right? Maybe you're smiling at a friend, right? Then maybe you're talking to one of your peers. Then maybe you're outside at recess playing alongside somebody with the eventual goal of being like, hey, do you want to play together at recess? So this is what I usually end up doing. And this is going to fall apart when I hold it, but these are 9-piece blank puzzles that you can buy on Amazon. And so as I talk through each of these steps with clients, with students, we're filling out a puzzle piece. Okay. And so, as we land with step number 7, we have this awesome puzzle that is a visual, tangible reminder of the strategies that we can use in order to understand and manage our worry. So I oftentimes, it's a 9-piece puzzle. So I put my name, Mrs. V, in the middle of the puzzle. It leaves us with one blank puzzle piece. Sometimes kids are like, oh, I have another tool I can use. So that's a fun sort of discussion opportunity, or an opportunity for kids to be creative or come up with a tool that they think might be helpful for them individually. But I really love that this is something that they can take with them to remind themselves of the 7 strategies and the 7 tools. So this is, it came in like a 12 pack. I think you can buy a whole bunch of different options, obviously, on Amazon. Whatever you want, they basically have, it seems like, on Amazon. But I like the 9-piece because, again, we're talking about the 7 tools. And so it's nice to just have as close to 7 as possible. Okay. So this is, I wanted to spend a couple minutes also, or several minutes, kind of highlighting some additional books and resources. Like I said at the beginning, when I first heard Lynn Lyons, I was so grateful to have these concrete 7 tools. And it really feels like and felt like a framework for me to be able to kind of formulate my work with kids. And since that time, I've gathered resources and tools that have helped reinforce those concepts. And so I highlighted several of those throughout the presentation, but these are some additional ones that I find are my go-tos and that I use quite often. And they do have kind of a cognitive behavioral focus to them, which I think, you know, Lynn and Reed don't focus on a ton in their trainings and in their book, Anxious Parents, Anxious Kids, or Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents. But I feel like it's a necessary part of the work that I do with kids, is helping them understand the connection and interplay between their thoughts, feelings, and actions, right? And we know that so much of anxiety and worry is wrapped up in automatic negative thoughts, those thinking traps, however you describe it for kids. So Catching Thoughts is a really nicely well-written book about a little girl who is aware of just kind of a heavy negative thought that starts to follow her wherever she goes. And she tried to unthink her unwanted thought, but the more she thought about it, the bigger it got. She learns to talk back to it. She realizes that like it gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more she focuses on it. And so then she kind of, instead of having it follow her, she greets it. Hello, she says. And then she realizes that she has all these other thoughts too. And so she starts catching her other thoughts. And as she does that, that big worry thought starts to kind of get pushed aside because she's gathering hopeful and lovely thoughts. So anyway, this is a really good book for kids. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll then, we'll draw like blank balloons, and I'll have my clients write their own thoughts on those balloons. You could actually do a very real, tangible activity, writing thoughts on actual balloons and releasing the balloons. So again, this focuses on the power of thoughts. The what to do when you worry too much, that's a whole series. There's another one, what to do when your brain gets stuck, that focuses more on OCD. But those are really good resources and tools that also talk about how worry works, as well as learning ways to respond to worry and manage worry. What is a thought? A thought is a lot. So, you know, this talks about thoughts have power, power to move you, power to be scared, power to be sad, power to be happy. So really helping kids understand how thoughts work. The Playing CBT game is a great strategy for helping kids recognize an event, the thought, the negative thought that occurs, the emotion, sensation, and action. So I highlighted some examples at the bottom there. So, you know, you can have an individual choose an event, and then there also are blank cards. So if there's a particular event that has been or seems to be most distressing for your student, you could write your own event here. And then on the back of each of the cards, you know, are these like prompts, right? If this happened to me, my automatic thought would be, right? My response would be, if this happened to my friend, I would tell them. And then the negative thought, this always happens to me. So this game really allows kids, and then these are feeling cards. And there's like a whole bunch of different emotions: confusion, jealousy, remorse, envy, insult, loneliness, panic, right? Worry. So you're helping kids to identify, as this event is occurring, I'm having this negative thought, which is causing me to feel confused or overwhelmed or frustrated. And it's causing me to blush, right? Or I have dry mouth. So kids can look through these and be like, oh, that's right. Like that happened to me. My heart starts to race, right? And then the action. And sometimes the actions are like I exercised, I went home, right? Sometimes the action based on the thought and emotion and sensation is I froze, or I annoyed somebody, right? And then here's where it's teaching some coping thoughts. So, you know, reminding myself when that negative thought shows up, right? I am loved, even though I don't feel like I am right now. Not everything is my fault. So as we're supporting kids and understanding that CBT triangle or circle, we're also encouraging them to develop some coping thoughts and some replacement thoughts. So I have found this game to be really useful for actually kids of all ages. I think there are different ways to use it. There are little emotion board, physical sensation boards. There's an actual board game that you can play with a start and finish and task. So you can make it as simple or as involved as I guess you want it to be, right? If you wanted to play the full game, maybe if you were doing a group with students, you could use the board. If you're using, you could use just the cards even, which is what I often do, to help kids understand, like I said, that interplay and that interaction between their thoughts, feelings, and actions. So those are the strategies, those are the tools that I use most often in my work with my clients. I'm hoping that the information was helpful for you in terms of developing maybe some different approaches or strategies to be able to support your students. I think that it's always helpful to have different tools, right? And knowing how we can best support our students, especially now, and with all of the uncertainty that they have experienced for the last year-ish, right? Knowing that there are strategies and approaches that we can use to be able to support them is so very important and helpful. So, yeah, so hopefully this was helpful. I'm open to questions or feedback from anybody.
I really enjoyed, Melissa, you giving us the 7 tools, and I'm really going to try to use some of these in the work that I do with my students.
Awesome, thank you for that. I think those 7 tools have been really beneficial for me, even just as a framework, right? And, you know, I think about how often as counselors, maybe you're touching base with students on a regular basis. So to have like a tool that you could really hone in on during each of those moments with your students, or doing it however it makes the most sense. But I have enjoyed the tools, and so I'm grateful to hear your comment on that. So thank you.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much. I think I speak on behalf of everyone today about how helpful and insightful this presentation was, and how we can easily take what you've shared and implement it in our practices in our schools from day one. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Lacey. Thank you. I hope that the rest of the conference goes well. And everybody stays warm.
Absolutely. Well, everybody enjoy your lunch break, and we'll see you back after the break. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.